Hi, so here we go. We are starting on chapter 3. This is about structure. How do you structure your classroom? And I feel like there's some good little nuggets in here, but a lot of it we probably kind of already know about. So we'll see what we got. Okay, so structure is also referred to as the learning space or learning environment. It's intended to facilitate positive, expected student behaviors while reducing negative, unwanted behaviors at the same time. We want to create a strong sense of we're here to learn. The structure is as much for the student as it is for you because if the students self regulate their behavior, are motivated, and have good attitudes, you can spend time and energy making dynamic, enjoyable lessons and engaging activities instead of redirecting students' attention. As we know, that's what we want to happen in the classroom. And yes, that seems pie in the sky, but working towards it is always good. So it says, whereas the physical setup is a physical framework, the day to day routines are mental and social framework, providing boundaries of what to do, what not to do, what's expected, how to get along, and so on. And then it talks about classroom ecology or classroom peer ecology, and that the teacher needs to guide that ecology so that the students can then sculpt it in a mutually negotiated environment. So, teacher, students together create that ecology, which I found interesting. I know my first couple years of teaching, you know how you always have one or two really tough classes, and man, I just struggled and struggled. I was like, what am I doing wrong in these classes? And to realize that each class is going to have its own ecology, the own feeling in that class. And so it's just good to keep that in mind. So here are some things to take into consideration. So you should be thinking about the decor. What do you want to look like and feel like in your classroom? How's it going to feel welcoming? Student work, how you can display student work. And I know that's harder in high school, but something to really think about so that students feel seen and valued. Classroom materials, like how is it organized, how accessible is it, how do they get it, how do they put it back. Teacher's desk, where do you want to put your teacher's desk, what do you want to use it for. And it says, how does that teacher's desk work in the flow of the classroom? And he says, generally teachers should not sit at their desks during class time. The teacher should be circulating, interacting with students, participating in the learning. So thinking about how do you use your environment in a way that helps you interact with your students more. Student desks, how do you want them to be situated? How do they interact with each other in their desks? Area for whole group instruction, area for group work. Are you going to use learning centers, what that might look like? And then we also have other types of equipment like computers, lab equipment, things like that, and even a classroom library. What would your classroom library look like? So those are some of the choices that we have. And then he also says, keep in mind that most teachers change the physical layout multiple times throughout the year as things come up and as you need it. I'm one of those teachers that change the seats probably monthly just because I love change and I want to see how we can utilize it better. I also change things as needed depending on what we were doing in the class for that day. So, one of the things to think about is how you can incorporate students into changing things as needed. So, one thing you could think about doing is if you have a certain way you like the desks, putting like tape on the floor for where the desks go or the tables, we don't have desks. And then when we move them to do group work or whatever, you could have the students put them back where the tape is. So, there's things like that that you could do. He does talk about seating arrangements and how you should see what works the best for you and for your students. And also thinking about put the seats according to classroom activity. So seat students in rows for direct instruction and individual work. See students in groups if you want them to interact, play a game, or collaborate. For other activities, you might want to do a semicircle or a U shape, a horseshoe. I've done the horseshoe shape and I actually love it a lot, where students can interact with each other but still see forward as needed. So thinking about that. Assigned seating, I know for most classes, assigned seating is really helpful. If you have issues in your class with kids who need to be separated, assigned seating is the way to go. I've also had days where I'm like, okay, you get to choose where you want to sit today. Or some classes, I do let them sit where they want. Usually those are the older students. The downside of that is that I have seen is we can get to the end of the school year and they don't know other kids in the class because they always sit with the same people all the time. So that's the downside of that. And then changing the seating arrangements as needed. So never feel like well, I made seating chart, it didn't work, I have to deal with it. Nope, change it up as you need to. He does talk about the wall space, how to utilize the wall space in your classrooms. I do think that that is something sometimes we forget about, that our wall space can be used, posting our goals for what we want our students to learn and referring back to it as we go. I think it's great when we can put student work up. We don't have a ton of space, but I love that also. And things that we just want our students to remember, when we post those up, it helps them to maybe a word wall, vocabulary wall, those kinds of things. Okay, then he starts talking about the classroom culture and how that includes the daily workings of the class, what we want that to feel like and look like. And he gives some tips. He says, no free time. Don't allow it. When in an environment of learning and growth, there's always something to do to gain more insight, more knowledge, more skills. Students will ask if they can have free time, and they shouldn't have free time in a class. And we've really been working towards that, especially with phones, where we're saying, like, just because your work is done doesn't mean you should be on your phone. There's always more learning to do, and having a list of activities that they could be doing to interact with each other. And I would say even stuff like, having a puzzle or playing chess or something like that would be more engaging and useful than letting them have free time while they're on their phones. So what could we do with that? Remember, students are here to learn. He used what he called the month of never, which I know I don't know if I would do this, but some teachers might. He said he created a giant calendar of a single month with 31 days. The name of the month was Never. Sprinkled throughout the calendar were marked days, free time, nap, play games, and other goofy things. And when a student would ask for free time, I would turn to the calendar of Never, find the day when we'll have free time, and tell the students, oh yeah, we can have free time on the 5th of Never. So, that might work for you. I probably wouldn't do it. It's cute, but this one, have clear guidelines. And this one I think is really important. With student input, collaboratively generate a list of 3 to 5 classroom guidelines for all to follow. So for Southridge, we would have RISE, like we already have them, but even talking with our students of, well, what does that look like in the classroom? What does respect look like? What do you want from each other, from me here in the classroom? So I love that. And then it says, let the rules be the bad guy, not you. He also talks about movies. I'll skip that one, but he believes that watching a full movie is kind of a waste of time in the class. And so, it is something we should think about is, are we using a movie to help our students and support them and help their learning grow, or are we using it as a break? So thinking about that. Okay, this one I think is big, and this is routines. So how does this work? How do things work in your classroom? And he says, routines are the backbone of a well-functioning classroom. They instill predictability, promote organization, and create a sense of security. Loved, loved, loved this part of the book where he kind of went through, here's some pieces you always need to consider in your classroom. What does it look like when kids enter the classroom? What should they be doing? How do you say hi to them? Like, what is that? How do they exit the classroom? What do you want that to look like? So, I've seen a lot of classes that, the kids are done and they're standing at the doorway playing on their phones. Is that what we want to do to exit our classroom? Do we have a better way to do it? Asking for help. How do they get help when they need it? We might want to think about things like some teachers use the red and green cups, and green means I'm good, I got it. Red means, hey, I need a little bit of help. And you can be circulating, and while kids change those over, it makes it an easy way to go help them. They don't have to sit there with their hand raised, and then you forget about them. And so that's a great thing. But like, how do they get help in your classroom? What does independent work look like? So what are they allowed to do during independent work? What are they not? How loud is it allowed to be in your class? How quiet do you want it? Those kinds of things, which is a great time to use your voice level chart. Working in small groups, what does that look like? Where do they go? Do they get to decide who they work with? That kind of thing. Working in large group, like whole class. Do you use things like wheel of names to call on people? Do you have sticks that you pull? Do you have them work, do think, pair, share? What does that look like? What does it look like leaving the classroom? Like for us, they should be using their smart pass, but definitely have some kind of a hall pass of some sort. And they should be leaving their phones in the classroom, but that's you. Okay. What does it look like when they arrive late? What do you want them to do? Teach that so that they know the expectation, so they don't come in, making a big hullabaloo in the classroom. And then handing in work. So where do they hand in their work? What does that look like? So they know how to do that. So those are some things to think about as you're planning for routines in your classroom. And then he says, use examples and non-examples to teach the routines, and literally show students what you mean by entering the room and sitting down. And so like having them practice, or you showing them. So, and this is another one of those reteaching. If they're not doing it the way that you expect them to, doing that reteaching makes a big difference. So those are some things to think about. He does talk about bell work, like things that, what do you want them to do when the bell rings? So they've come in, they're sitting down, the bell rings. What does that look like? Are they still chit-chatting? Do they have something to do? Do you start the class when the bell rings with, a joke or like whatever? What does that look like? And I liked the way he talked about code switching. And some people may or may not know what that is, but code switching is talking about jumping between different languages or different cultures. And he talks about that going from class to class all day is a type of code switching. Things that are expected in one class is going to be different in the next class. And I hadn't thought about that before, but thinking about our students need to switch that code, like code switching, when they come into your class. So by having those expectations of what happens in your class at the beginning, it gives them that cue of, okay, we're switching. We're in a new culture, right? And definitely it helps for us to have as much continuity as possible between class to class, but it's never going to be exactly the same. We don't want it to be exactly the same. So whatever we can do to help our students with that code switching is great. Okay, he does talk about having a sense of community. As we know, that makes a huge difference. A sense of community in a classroom cultivates a supportive and collaborative atmosphere. He says, when you create a sense of community, also called a learning community, students tend to engage in deeper learning, see clearer connections between subjects and between students and teachers, and increase their academic and social interaction. And I would say it also helps a lot with behavior when we have that sense of community in the classroom. He also talks about giving rewards in the classroom. And of course, we have been using our RISE tickets, but that doesn't mean you can't or shouldn't have classroom rewards. But these do not have to be physical rewards, right? You can do things like celebrating who got the highest score on a test, or who turned in the most work over the semester, or, like those kinds of things. And you have a little celebration, put their name on on a poster or whatever. So what I really liked was he talked about what he calls the now that reward. And what he's saying is rewarding students now that they are working, or now that they turned in all their work, or now that they are no longer tardy. And so I really love that. He said, give now that rewards randomly. So students focus on the tasks, not the reward. And that's a good reminder for us too, when a lot of times we feel like, why are we rewarding them for something they should already be doing? Well, we're not rewarding them every time. There's no way we can. And so by giving them that intermittently, they're still doing the task for task's sake, but getting that positive reinforcement of, hey, we're doing the thing. So that's awesome. And he talked about setting class goals, which I thought was kind of cool. So he said, for example, set a class goal. If everyone gets, as an average, we get 85% or higher on the next quiz, we could have some type of a class reward, whatever that might be. Get to play a game or whatever. And then he says, proficiency, if we all learn this certain thing, we can do something. Or even behavior, if we have a sub tomorrow, and if I get all positive responses, we can do whatever or have whatever. Okay. So that's kind of a cool thing. One thing that I started doing years ago, and I hadn't done it for a little while, but I would have Dun Bros Day randomly, and Dun Bros was like they come into class, and if all their work is done and turned in, they get to sit in one section and they get to play games and stuff with their friends and maybe have a snack. And when I say games, I don't mean on their phones. I mean like they play Uno or whatever you have there for them. And then on the other side are the kids who are still working to finish up whatever it is they need to. And once they finish and get their stuff turned in, they get to move over to the Dun Bros table. So that's an idea of a way to have a work day that's fun and engaging and really does get them to get their work done. And then, of course, he talks about praise and recognition. And the best praise is always targeted and intentional. So not just saying good job, but like telling them what they did. And that also, of course, includes feedback on tests or even on their daily work, right? You did a great job on this piece. You did a good job explaining this. Maybe next time do a little bit of expand on this, like that kind of thing. And then he talks about closure, like closing out your lessons instead of just like, well, we'll finish up tomorrow. Like, give a closing piece, and that will actually lead you into what is it going to look like as they leave the classroom. So some of the things that he talks about is exit slips, so that students are handing you something on the way out the door. I loved having them do that because then I made sure every single student actually did it and they didn't skip it. And sometimes they didn't have to put their name on it, but I just would gather them up on the way out the door. And I just cut scratch paper into quarters and they just wrote on the back, just asked them a question and they would answer it. Doing a journal to check their learning that way. Doing 3, 2, 1. So he says students write 3 facts they learned, 2 questions to clarify understanding, and 1 skill they will use. So that's kind of fun. Doing a think, pair, share, doing a 30-second think and write, doing an ungraded quiz. But I would say even sometimes just your thumbs up, thumbs down. How did we, do we feel like we learned more today? Yes, no, maybe, doing a fist of 5, like that kind of thing. So just some of a wrap up of what were we supposed to learn today and did we get there? So I love that. And then he says structure requires vision. How do you envision your class working? When you think of a typical day in your life as a classroom teacher, what do you see? It doesn't just happen, it takes planning and preparation. Classroom structures must be maintained regularly. You must tend to reinforce, review, and address appropriate behavior classroom structure, right? So as we know, we talk about it, we reteach it, we revisit it, like what's working and what's not working, and change things when they're not working. Structure works best in a culture that supports it. So being consistent makes a huge difference. And it's so hard because we get so tired as teachers and we're doing the same things over and over again. But that consistency makes a difference. It's so hard on the students when they're like, I don't know what's going to happen, right? Sometimes they do this, sometimes they do this. So that consistency matters. And then it says its structure is essential for effectively functioning in a learning environment. Chaos and structure are opposites. You either have one or the other. So we want to make sure that our classrooms are structured and that we have a plan. And one of the things that I learned is change it if it's not working, right? Look at what's going on. And if there's a problem somewhere, how can we fix it? I will plug one more time. I'm happy to come and help. I'm happy to, we could brainstorm and see what's happening and some ideas for some changes. And I'm happy to come and observe and kind of see, hey, what's going on? Maybe I could catch some things that are happening that maybe you don't see when you have 30 plus kids, and maybe could help that way too. So love to come and help. Thanks for listening, and we'll do chapter 4 next time.